Hello and welcome to the Big 12 Mafia Show. I'm your host, Nathan Balmer Brown, and with me is a fantastic new guest. I hope that maybe she'll want to come back again. This is Becky or Rebecca. Go Huskies. How you doing, Becky?
I'm doing good. I'm ready to get into this. I may not come back, but
So tell us your thoughts right away. I'm not even going to do a preamble. What are you thinking about this big news that Washington is going to be going to the Big Ten?
excited. A little sad, obviously, but super excited. Um, like it's big. It's like it's an iron sharpens iron kind of thing, and it's not a team that like Washington's not like just a bump on the log. They're a team that
Right.
will maybe have like 3 years where they're kind of down, and then suddenly boom, they're at the top. So it's like a top 20 program going into the Big Ten. So it's exciting.
I think what's really interesting is they're willing to bring in some top end talent schools, knowing that the Minnesotas, the Illinois, and Indianas, maybe that pushes them even farther down. I think that dynamic is going to be interesting to observe as we move forward, especially if we're talking about Florida State and Clemson also potentially moving over.
Yeah, yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's like, you know, a lot of people are like, well, Ohio State didn't want it, and I'm like, it doesn't matter if Ohio State didn't want it. Adding an Oregon and an Iowa or a Washington pushes the other schools down, and it makes it a lot harder for them to get to the top.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Immaculate has finally got his face on camera. Immaculate, it's good to see you.
We've been talking behind the scenes about doing this for a little bit. I figured I'd show people that I'm not just some troll behind a board here. So
It's okay. I don't think anybody was thinking that.
well, you never know these days. But she might have.
That's, yeah, that's possible. Really quick, I want to call out the first people that were here today. By the way, I appreciate everybody. We're working on a delay of an hour, almost an hour, because Greg Flugar's show. Obviously, Greg's the man, and I don't want to cut into his broadcast time. So I appreciate everybody's patience as we waited a little bit longer to get our show started. Sergeant Pickles, first in the house. Garnett and Old, let's go. Earl Carr. Rebecca is here, obviously. We have Mark 9999 and John Coy. Let's see what else. Laura Weiss is in here. Hi, Laura. And Patrick, Daniel Gygax, Classic Sports. Wow, there's a bunch of people that's moved over. P.S. Doff is here. And then G Brew. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you being here. Obviously, if you want to be part of the show, you could do a super chat, regular chat, and if I can get to it, and there's not too many, I'll try to read those. Super chats get a little bit more of a preference. And then last but not least, if you want to be a subscriber, subscribers are really big because their content is always given preference. It's easy to sign up. Just go to the Big 12 Mafia page at join. It's in the middle of the page, and there's different options. We're also going to bring in Moen Vision, who is a big homer. How you doing, Moen?
Hanging in there, guys. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. So that we're gonna do a circle really quick. I want Becky to tell us, besides the fact that Washington is going to be in this great brand, which is the Big Ten, and iron sharpens iron, as she says. What is the next steps? Where do we go from here to get to 2024? What does Washington need to do to really make that next step?
I mean, at this point, Washington just needs to. I mean, they're going to have to invest a little bit more in their actual athletics. I think we lag a little bit in that department. Like, we invest in certain sports, but not all sports. I think basketball now has to have an actual investment made. But at this point, it's just, it's a matter of ponying up some money and paying our coaches to keep them. Can't have them. I don't want to see them leave for another job, especially like in the same conference. That would be brutal.
Do you think that's going to end? Because Washington has been sort of a revolving door at coach, which couldn't have helped their consistency, right?
Well, it's really funny. So, yeah, I mean, in the last since 2000, since New Heisel got fired for gambling, a little bit of
right,
which a little bit of a revolving door. Two coaches, and then of course, winning. Tyron Willingham came in and they went to 0-12, and then Steve Sarkisian came in, and Sarkisian, went from 0-12 to 5-7 in a season. So that's like ridiculous. And they probably would have made a bowl game if they hadn't gone for it a lot late in the game, just punted or something. And then Peterson and then Lake. So it hasn't been a lot of coaches. But the funny thing is in the 100-plus years of Washington history, only 2 coaches have ever left for another job. Darrell Royal, who left for Texas after 1 year. And obviously, history will write that as probably the greatest coach in Texas history and probably will forever be. And then Steve Sarkisian left for his dream job of USC.
Right.
So they're pretty good, and they're pretty good about paying coaches and keeping them happy and things like that. And I mean, they were offering like Matt Campbell like $9 million a year to coach the team, so they're willing to pony up the cash. It's just a matter of, do we have to get to that point? So
I think it's a fair assessment. Immaculate, what do you think about all this?
Well, 2 questions. Do you guys wrestle and do you play hockey?
So, the wrestling team was cut for Title IX back in the day.
Somebody's listening to the Board of Regents meeting. Is that me? I think that's me. Sorry.
I mean, we're in a new age. You can have women's wrestling. That's fine.
I apologize.
Right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm like, the wrestling team was cut. I mean, we cut swimming like a decade ago as well. But we have a hockey team, but it's club at this point. So it's working its way through. But Seattle Kraken have taken a very keen interest in the hockey program. So there may be some developments on that front in the near future.
I mean, as a former Iowan, we don't care too much about hockey, but some of these other crazies like the Gophers and the Wolverines, they'll definitely love you if you start that up.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys, what else do they want? Baseball's not really a huge thing. Lacrosse, that's an up-and-coming thing in the conference. Do you guys do lacrosse?
We don't have lacrosse.
That'd be one to really kind of get into in terms of the higher end. Iowa isn't doing it either, but if you're trying to get in with those folks, that'd be a good one to do.
Yeah, I'm like, our biggest thing is rowing. It's like a little oddball
crew
sport.
Is big. Yep.
Crew is massive out here.
Yeah,
a lot of national titles in that. And then like oddball, like the other thing is like soccer's getting pretty good. The soccer team's getting really, really good on the men's side. And then obviously softball is our big, like, I think our softball team actually turns a profit, which is hard to believe, but it turns a profit.
I'm not sure how, but isn't softball actually for women a bigger moneymaker than basketball?
I couldn't be. It probably is out here.
Because I actually, I see softball, like women's softball on TV when the tournament time comes around. It's straight on ESPN. It's getting pretty good coverage, whereas women's basketball kind of gets overwhelmed by the men's basketball. Their tournaments are somewhat at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the softball program just got their own facility, like their own like locker rooms and like lounge area. It's like a $1.3 million facility that they built for them. It's insane.
Yeah.
Not sure. It's got batting cages and all that stuff.
Yeah, not sure how much like all these other sports really interest like a lot of the realignment folks, but it's a big part of it in that these type of programs can now get funded a whole lot more when you get this big chunk of money that I do believe you guys are about to get here this next week. Well, at least you know that you're going to get it.
Well, I know they want to raise funds to remodel the softball stadium. So that's probably with this, it's like, okay, this helps. So, this will help tremendously.
Let me ask Moen this, because I think this is something he's been preaching for the last year, and it's no expansion without Notre Dame. So Moen, what does this news tell you?
Okay. For starters, you have to frame no future expansion without Notre Dame.
Okay.
You can have expansion without Notre Dame, but it always has to lead to Notre Dame.
Oh, all right. Okay.
So
I like that definition.
This move doesn't do much for that. The next move will be the one that does more for securing Notre Dame.
And is Oregon in?
They're in, but I have a feeling they're going to get a different deal than Washington.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
it's going to be more money or something?
Less
Ooh,
money.
No.
Okay, that I meant less money. The Washington was going to get more money, is what I meant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Washington will get more money, and Oregon will have escalators once they take care of some things. They'll get
Got
up
a
to Washington's level, but they got to take care of things.
Garnet and Nold here, who's also a partner with the York College Sports Connection, which we're part of. Garnet, they give this question: how do you think the Pac-12 moves affect the ACC? And thank you very much for the super chat, guys.
Like,
Does it
I
affect the
mean,
AC?
oh, for sure. Like, Florida State's now looking at Oregon and Washington. Like, they're like, we've had more success than they have in the last 20 years. Hold on, like, what's going on here? I think it's going to push their timetable up a little bit. I think like it's going to make them a little more antsy because, like Moen said, the eventuality is Notre Dame, right? I mean, with the SEC not going past 16, and Clemson possibly jumping ship, and then Miami will jump ship. Like, it puts Florida State in a very particular position where they have an option, but it could run out if North Carolina jumps ship. So it's like there's a little bit of. If I was a Florida State fan, I'd be like, I'm not worried. I think we'll end up one of the two, but Notre Dame becomes that key piece that can really like clog it up. Because then they have to go out and find team number 22 or 21. It just makes it a little more difficult for them.
Personally, for me, I think the reason why this is connected is you kind of have to look at this almost psychologically. How was everyone mentally before Colorado jumped? I remember most people thought that this was all crazy talk, that it's not going to happen. And then that happened. And now all across media, everyone has a different perspective on it. So I think Florida State has been waiting. And when they saw this, they jumped. Not to say it's fully coordinated, but it does seem like a good time to do this, to take advantage of this, to say, hey, look, the Big Ten is in the market, so we're looking to do this now. Whereas before, if they would have did this on their own, I don't think most people would have believed that there was anywhere for them to go. Whereas now, I think people are a little more believing that there's somewhere to go. So I do think it's connected indirectly. Might be directly, but it's all kind of wrapped up in together with consolidation and where these schools all know we're kind of going for 2026.
I think it's a big deal because the stepping stones to get to the different places, it does sort of have to have an order. Florida State, I know there's a big lean that they're going to be there. I really haven't heard much about Clemson, though. Have you guys heard anything definitive about Clemson?
No, I think Clemson's waiting to see what. I think everybody's waiting to see what Florida State does.
Okay.
So I think if Florida State can challenge it, then another school may attempt to challenge it. And, eventually somebody's lawyer will find the loophole, and it'll come crashing down. So, but I mean, like, because the issue is like what Feinbaum said. Like, Feinbaum was like, oh, I don't think the SEC is going to go after Florida State or Clemson because they already have a presence there.
Right.
He seems to think they're going to go Miami and North Carolina. So, I mean, like, I think you hear those things and then you see these things. I think it's just making them very, very nervous that they're going to get. I mean, getting left behind by $30-40 million is not, and your Florida State is not a good thing. Like, it makes it very tough to compete.
Let's look at this question here, or statement from Sergeant Pickles. He says, Moen Vision Immaculate, please elaborate if you can. What percentage do you think the Washington, Oregon will get and why they will be different? Becky, you're in on this too.
Moen might be a little bit better with just trying to figure out a percentage. I'm more of from a political perspective of, from what we've seen, there's a little more pushback on Oregon. I don't think there's any pushback on Washington. I think the entire Big Ten wants them, and I don't think the networks have a problem with it. All of Washington's numbers are great. I think that's a slam dunk. I've said for a while now it's Washington +1. I think Oregon is the network's darling. They're going to push for that, and I think the Big Ten is probably going to have a little bit of pushback, but allow it in the end. And so I just have this feeling that it's going to be treated a little separately. Washington is going to get brought in first, and then Oregon soon after. And if you're going to have two different contracts, that's how you want to do it anyways. Otherwise, it's a pretty awkward moment if you have everyone in the room and the two parties in the room have different deals.
Right. It's true, and it could be in where that ends up at. Becky, what do you think?
I think like it's going to be in that. I think they'll get more. They'll get more than the Big 12. I think they're going to get right about where the ACC is. I think they'll get in that range, that like $33 to $36 million range. I think that's where they're going to fall. They go a little higher. But I mean, that's roughly about half of what they're going to get.
I'd probably
and then
go
they'll get
45-ish at least.
Yeah, I think 45 would be on the higher side.
Yeah.
I might be a little conservative with it, but I mean, like, it just seems right that it's going to be about that because they're averaging 75 million over the course of the deal. So
right. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily start off at that. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
So
back-ended deal for sure.
Yeah, that 35 million just makes sense. Like, it's going to be 35 million each year. They won't be too far behind. At the very end of the contract, they'll be a little bit behind, but they know, next year, we're, the next media deal, we're right back in it. So,
Moen, what do you think?
It'll be more than that. They're going to get a 60% share for each of them. Some people are questioning in chat. Oregon has made commitments to the Big Ten on improvements to research. I think that they're going to get tied. There's going to be some escalators in their deal to get tied to that. They had also mentioned building a hockey arena, but I think it's more about them getting the academics up to at least on the research side up to the Big Ten standard, because right now Oregon in the Big Ten is the lowest research university, and it's by a lot.
Yeah, they're the lowest in a lot of markets.
Should note that they are building a brand new research facility. Like, that was already in the works before a year ago. Like,
right.
That's already being built. So they're trying to get there. Obviously, it's not an overnight thing, but
what's their research going to be? Do you know?
I have no idea. I've not looked into
it. It's not like medical or engineering or anything like that. It's something.
It can't be medical, and it can't be freestanding engineering. That's the thing. Oregon has to get with their legislators and get some things revoked. Oregon's not allowed to have the OHSU, which is the Oregon Health. It broke off from Oregon years ago because they required them to have an independent medical school. And Oregon State, I believe, is the only one that's allowed to have a dedicated engineering school.
Wow.
So it really kind of messed Oregon up. So I think what the Big Ten wants is Phil Knight to put some political money in there to get the legislators to change that to where Oregon can have a freestanding engineering school and possibly a medical school of some kind that's actually linked to the university instead of being an independent association with Oregon University or University of Oregon.
All right, let's change gears a little bit. And before we do that, I want to thank everybody for being here. We got well over 100 people watching. That's great. Really appreciate everybody's come over. I know Greg's show's still going, so I don't mind the competition. He's definitely the guy that should receive all of it. But I appreciate everybody who's here today. Please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment or suggestion. We try to read those and get back to them. If you want to be part of the show, you can do super chats, or we could turn around and also we have subscriptions that you can sign up for on the main page. And before I go to this statement and this change of course for Arizona, I wanted to bring up this next comment from Garnet Nold. He says, breaking: Arizona Regents have a benefit sheet of Big 12 payouts, television contract details, projections, and your Mark's vision statement. So this leads into what I was going to say. I might as well read it now. Dennis Dodd has a reporting. He says Arizona is now a hard lean to join the Big 12, scheduled to be in executive session at the moment, which is going right now, actually. No word on ASU. Also economic hang-up regarding Washington, which has figured it needs about $10 million annual to cover the travel. That would impact revenue share significantly. So I guess before we leave Washington, let's talk about that $10 million travel cost. There's no kickback on that, right, Moen?
No, they have to absorb that. Every
Yeah, that's what I thought.
university covers their own travel.
Yeah,
But
that's
it's like
what
I said,
thought.
they're not going to get 35 million a year.
Yeah.
These
Okay.
guys are going to get 60% shares.
Okay.
Oregon will have those escalators once they fulfill those commitments. And the other thing you got to remember is they're investing. They're going to become partners in the Big Ten network.
Right. Yeah.
Just like Maryland and Nebraska and Rutgers did. So they'll get there. At the end of the contract, they'll be full members and they'll be making $100+ million in total payout. So
You're making me sick. Just stop. You know, I'm
I think they'll be fine.
Just to touch upon that a little bit too. That's
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
number right now that's going to go up considerably.
Right.
That
Well,
Big
the
Ten
playoff
network
payout's
number
changing.
and
That
the
number's
Big
changing.
Ten network is going to get a lot more coverage across the country. I'm in Arizona right now. I actually can get the Pac-12 network much more easily than I can get the Big Ten network. So I
was
imagine
gonna say, same thing in Seattle. You can get the
Yep.
Pac-12 network more easily than you can the Big Ten.
that's going to change when they're moving over to the East Coast more. You're moving up into the Northwest. So the payouts on that are also going to go up.
Yeah.
Right. Totally makes sense.
mean,
okay,
figure-
so let's go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the Seattle metropolitan area is 4 million people, so they're bound to get. It's a lot of people. 4 million people is a lot of people to be able to access that TV.
Right.
So
Well, it'll come, I promise, because the Big Ten is going to be everywhere. We all know it. So let's talk about this Arizona then. So what do we think about Arizona being the next pin? And then there's a rumor that maybe Arizona and Arizona State decide tomorrow. Have you guys heard that?
I have.
Oh,
Okay. And do you have any more information on it? Because that I just know about the rumor.
So I guess the Board of Regents meeting tonight is just like to get them caught up, and then to basically they're going to say that they want to do it or not. And then tomorrow, apparently the Big 12 presidents are going to vote tonight to let them in.
Okay.
At that point, tomorrow, then they'll announce, okay, we're going to do this. This is what we want to do. But they want assurances that they get in before they say yes.
Okay. And it'll be for
Because-
both schools.
Yeah. So the Board of
Okay.
Regents controls both schools.
Right.
So, and they are adamant that both schools go. So essentially they're forcing Arizona State, from what I heard, they're forcing Arizona State kicking and screaming to go into the Big 12. Arizona State does not want to do it, apparently.
I think Arizona State was really holding out hope that they could get that Big Ten invite. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to say the timing did not play out for them. This all went a little too fast. I think that this leak that we had about Stanford and California being what they were possibly looking at to go up to 20, I don't think there's a whole lot to Stanford and California, but there was a whole lot to saying that they're not looking at Arizona State and Utah, and that those two schools need to go to the Big 12. It's no choice anymore. Just take it, go there, and hope that you maybe get in the last phase of the Big Ten if that's really what you want. But I think they'll like it in the Big 12.
I think they will too. I think they'll be great there.
Moen, you have anything to add to the discussion
the
about
other
Arizona?
the other part of that tweet is going to 20. The Big Ten has laid the groundwork that they're going to 20 teams.
Right.
Oregon and Washington are 17 and 18. 19 and 20 are right around the corner. And I disagree with Greg on this. I think if Florida State withdraws from the ACC, I think I mentioned this last night, all they have to do is request applications from both the Big Ten and the SEC, and somebody's going to have to take that risk. And I think that will be the Big Ten and Fox. I think they will take that risk and take all that legal baggage that's coming with Florida State and whoever decides to come with Florida State to secure a foothold in the Southeast.
Yeah.
So the rumor that Paul Feinbaum put out this afternoon saying he thinks both are to the SEC still, even after all this information, you think that that's not based on anything?
I think they're going to probably try and get into both. They're going to submit applications to both.
Okay.
And see who it's a game of chicken to see who's going to take that risk.
Okay.
Because it is a risk. I mean, you're
Sure.
opening yourself up. So
I mean,
who's going to take that risk?
you have Iger now in charge at Disney, and he is penny pinching everything.
Yeah, that's
Like,
true.
I mean, when you're penny pinching Marvel Studios, like, and Lucasfilm,
Yeah.
like it. I mean, he's definitely going to penny pinch ESPN, even though he used ESPN. They used ESPN to buy all that stuff. So
Without ESPN, they're not making any money right now.
Without ESPN,
They're
they
a
never buy
loser.
Marvel. Yeah, they never buy Marvel.
Yeah.
I was reading this. They don't buy Marvel. They don't buy Lucasfilm. They don't buy Pixar. They don't buy anything.
That's crazy.
These deals, though, these are based upon future projections on what they're going to make on ad buys and on the market. And it can actually go up a little bit or go up down a little bit based upon that. Florida State in the ACC generally pulls 3-point something ratings to 4 points. You put them in the SEC and you start to make some of those rivalries be in conference matter towards postseason and whatnot. I wouldn't be surprised if the projections were anywhere moving them a full point to 2 points. Plus, with the location of Tallahassee, you don't want that to turn into Big Ten territory. That's minutes from the Georgia border. That's minutes from the Alabama border. You can drive to New Orleans from there in about the same time that it takes to drive to Miami. That's dangerous. Their whole path going forward is about protecting the Southeast, maintaining the Southeast, having the recruiting edge there, and being a regional footprint. If you let the Big Ten get that, I think Feinbaum is talking for the SEC, and they're not going to just let this slide. I do believe that they'll do what it takes to get FSU if FSU makes them believe that they want to go to the Big Ten, and I believe them. I think that they would go to the Big Ten in a heartbeat if they get the chance.
Yeah, I don't think they're bluffing.
No.
I don't think FSU.
Yeah, I think their preference would be the Big Ten. Their preference,
Yeah.
I think, is the Big Ten. The fans' preference is the SEC.
Yes.
Florida State's not buying planes for SEC travel.
No.
Not when you can drive there in the same day.
Right.
No
when
way.
a lot of those, yeah, you're not buying planes for that. You're buying especially if you go back and watch the whole conference they did, which I recommend everybody do. They break down research, the institution. He says several times what's best for the institution of Florida State. He's looking at it from big picture. And I think they want to be in the Big Ten. And I think the whiff of the SEC taking them will put them in the Big Ten because I don't think.
Yeah. I think if you looked at Florida State just like without their sports, you would be like, that's a Big Ten school. Like if you just wiped off the name Florida State and put them next to other Big Ten schools, you wouldn't know the difference. Like
someone might argue that Florida is a little bit more than them, but Florida's in the SEC, and I think FSU fits just fine.
Yeah.
And actually talking with some of our friends there, between Garnet and Old, who's in chat, a lot of FSU graduates are all across the country. So to some degree, being in the Big Ten connects their fan base and their graduates much more than the SEC would. So
makes sense.
I mean,
let's dive into this Arizona thing. Is that okay, Immaculate?
Absolutely. That's relevant right now.
So the Arizona Board of Regents, this is a comment from Nick, by the way. Thanks, Nick. Arizona Board of Regents should approve any move to the 12 just because the 12 payouts, TV contract details, projections, and vision statement immediately, and George Klyavkov still has provided none of the above. So I heard another rumor, that gotta love these rumors, that says the Apple deal is only good through tomorrow. It has a termination clause in it that says if you go past midnight Friday, and I don't know where that midnight would be, the deal's off the table. Have you guys heard that?
I actually asked Greg about that. That was the question I wanted to ask, and I definitely want to ask Moen about that right now because I have no idea about this. This idea that would they have just now sent a date like, okay, this expires right now, or would that have been made when they first made the offer? So maybe like a year ago, would this have been made? And so it's counted down till now, which that would tell us that the pack has just been sitting on this. Now, if they just recently said, you know what, this only sits here for another week and that's all you got, then that makes sense to me too, that they kind of arbitrarily decided this recently.
I'd imagine after that meeting where they all said we need to look at this and go back, that's when Apple put that clause in that said this is your date. There's nothing more to look at. We've put all this out there. This is a date we want an answer. That's not something that Apple's put in there with this date in mind, and we know that because they've been telling us 2 weeks for the last 8 months. So I mean, this deal has taken quite a while for them to craft. Apple's not going back and changing anything. So I think when they heard the president say, "Oh, we need to go back and look at this and have another meeting," Apple probably just said, "You know what? This is a date." And then we're pulling the contract and we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, just real quick on that. I've kind of thought for a while that maybe this was a product of the previous time when some of the schools were still there. And as of lately, Apple's been looking at some Disney pieces, whether it be ABC or ESPN. And I think this deal probably got put on the back burner. So that's why I was curious about that in terms of timing, in terms of how long this might have been sitting there for.
What I've heard is, I guess Apple's been notoriously bad. It has to go through their lawyers and then come back. So part of the issue is you negotiate with Apple, and then Apple's like, okay, we'll take this to our lawyers. And then, as we all know, lawyers sit on things and they take their sweet time. It can take 2 to 3 weeks sometimes. It can be like 24 hours. But I'm with Moen. I don't think that there was a clause until probably media days when they sat down and they kind of heard about it and they were like, well, we want to go back to the drawing board. And then when they got presented it this week, Apple was like, no, like you have till this day. So I bet they were told last week, no, you have until Friday, August 4th. And then at that time, whatever time of day they say, whether it's midnight, and it's most likely be Cupertino time, Apple. Like whatever time it is, like, and Apple's dead serious. I wouldn't put it past Apple, like, nope, we're done. And you know, if anything has changed, then I would guarantee that, like, with schools leaving, Apple can't just, like, that clause is only in there if everybody stays.
Yeah, they've probably getting tired of the situation themselves. Like, yeah, we're just about done with this.
Like, what's ironic is they kept saying that Apple takes so long to craft these deals. And the reason it's taken so long for the Pac-12 to figure something out is because Apple was taking all this time. And now it's Apple is the one that's impatient and says now's the time to make a decision. Yeah, this question right here, this statement, I wonder if this is true. If that offer was made a year ago and they sat on it, in other words, they've been sitting on this for more than even a couple months, then everyone in the Pac-12 leadership needs to be fired.
Well, let's put that a little in perspective. The leader of the CEO group for the last year, she just had her step down, was Dr. Kosei at Washington. Right. So, like, it would have behooved her to just sit on it, you know, and just be like, eh. But I don't think they sat on it. I don't think they had. I think they went looking for media partners in the last year. I think ESPN was like all in, and then Iger got hired, and Iger's like, no. And then Fox was like, no, we're good. You know, once they had the big, I think Fox pitted the Big 12 and the Pac-12 against each other, and I think Pac-12 was wanting more money, and then Big 12 was like, oh, we'll take this much because it's probably still a good amount. 32 million or whatever a year is still great. I think Pac-12 wanted ACC money, and Fox was like, well, these guys are going to take 32. What do you guys want to do? And they wouldn't budge. So it just makes better sense to go with the 32. Plus, the Big 12 just did an extension, whereas the Pac-12 had to ask for a brand new contract because the LA schools left. So a lot of things. I just think, like, I think there were some pieces that came in. Amazon obviously came in for a minute, and then you hear, I bet Ion really did come in for a minute. I never believed it, but it probably did happen. And then I guarantee the CW popped in there at some point, left and came back. Fox, I do know that Fox left and came back, and then left again.
That was right. That's right. In and out for sure.
In and out. Like, I don't think Apple had. I don't think they had it for a year. If they would have had it for a year, then that means they were negotiating it. They would have been negotiating it before the Los Angeles schools left.
Well, this is an interesting point, though. Danny Wright, who's also a subscriber. Thanks for being here, Danny. Appreciate it. He says, I have an opinion. I think once it went public, Apple wanted a decision and gave a deadline. I mean, that's possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to sit there and allow other companies, maybe or whatever, to sit there and craft counter proposals or whatever. Not that that's going to happen in this case, but just as a general business principle, you don't want it once it goes public. I mean, now everyone can sit there and try and scheme against that.
Yeah, like throw yourself in Apple shoes. They're new to the game. They're brand new to the game, and they don't want to get squeezed out of this. And the fear is that ESPN could just squeeze them out, or Fox or Amazon could come in and do it. It's like, I get it. I probably would have put a deadline on it too and been like, no. Everybody knows our numbers now. Here you go.
Bigger than that, real quick. They're also quite possibly in negotiations with Disney, ESPN in another regard. So once these numbers come out, now you can kind of see how tied up they might be there. You know, could be bigger than this.
Yep.
Comment here, super chat from Daniel Gygax. Thank you, Daniel. Says, who's willing to talk to FSU knowing that the ACC Gore will be in court for years? ACC might claim the SEC and Big are interfering with conference teams. That's been an argument that people have made.
Who's got the best lawyer?
And the money.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
Yep.
Well, I think that there's that angle. I don't want to go too much into it, but with the ACC network and what's been shown there, I think there is a very serious case for ESPN breaking the contract, not showing proper consideration, not making good on the deal that was promised. And you know, I'm no legal expert on that, but I know enough to know that that's what makes a contract. And if you don't have that from both ends, then it's not a legally binding contract. So if there's truth to that, as LFSU is presenting, I think that there's quite a bit of smoke there for that. But also on the other side, there's always the possibility that FSU, Clemson, UNC, these guys are just kind of the flag runners up front. And other schools are also interested in this. So, you know, this could just be part of a threat in order to try and get an overall ACC solution. Otherwise, you know, you might have vote of dissolution. There's a lot of angles on this. There's a lot more that we need to know. Thanks.
So,
I was going to say, ahead, I think it would have already occurred. I think the ACC would have already dissolved if every school knew they would have had a landing spot. We know that 4, maybe 5 would have that landing spot. They need 8. I don't see. There's so many moving parts to it, and I think Florida State they're going to challenge it. The problem is, ESPN could just put them in the SEC and solve all their problems. That's all it takes. So they challenge it, and then they still end up on ESPN anyway.
Right. Obviously that's the big trigger, and why Fox would come in big to try to get them. Yeah, that makes sense. BR has a comment here. He says that he's a subscriber. Thanks, BR. Appreciate it. He says, is Utah waiting for ASU and UA to decision before they decide, or do they still have more work to do? Do you guys know?
I think they're waiting. I don't think they have the invite yet. I think the Big 12 is waiting to see what happens with Oregon.
That's quite possible.
Gosh, just so many things depend on other things. It's insane how sophisticated this web is.
I think they've spent part of this week trying to make a last-ditch effort to see if that big door is still available to them, and stopping at 18, that's not going to be available to them, even though
not
USC wants it. And
because it could be possible. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's news to me. It's USC that wants them.
USC is very pro Utah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
I think that goes along the lines with their anti-Oregon stance. Like, if they don't want Oregon and they know the Big Ten's going to do this, then they have to figure out someone else that they do like.
I don't think there's a trade, though. 20 is the number.
it's not a
Well,
trade. It's
USC
like
doesn't have a vote, so
no, they don't have a vote. But I mean, if you're going to try and talk the rest of the Big Ten into this because you don't have a vote, and
Right.
say, hey, just from our perspective, our relationships, our experience, we like these guys better than those guys.
Well,
I'm-
the big thing with USC is they didn't want anybody on the West Coast. That was their deal with Kevin Warren. Nobody else from the West Coast. They did not want Washington or Oregon. They don't. They would rather see the two teams just kind of like leave and not bother them in Southern California anymore and taking their recruits. But they're not happy right now. They don't care about Washington. It's like a friendly thing with them in Washington. It's really funny. But Oregon is like a thorn in their side. They hate Oregon. Like they'd let Boise State into the Big Ten in their opinion before they let in Oregon. And that's not. I'm not kidding there.
Oregon have their own. It seems that whenever they're going out recruiting, they seem to make people mad. I don't know how. I don't know why.
Wow.
Just something like they just make people mad with whatever their business is.
I do want to put this out there. A recruit that did an Oregon visit fairly recently is wearing his Oregon jersey, does not have a logo for the conference on the jersey.
Right.
Take that as you will.
Pretty safe bet.
Yeah.
Here's a comment from Justin about Apple and Mountain West and the rump of the Pac-12 if all this happens. He says, I can see Apple getting into college football by getting the rights for the Mountain West. They would have to buy those from Fox, I think. If Apple can get the Mountain West teams $20 million a year, there's no way Mountain West teams get $20 million a year. Then they would be the best G5 league out there. Just Justin, I appreciate you being here. Thank you. But there's no way even if the Mountain West picked up Stanford and Cal, they're still looking at 14, 15 million at the most.
I'll give Justin a shout out.
Pretty.
Your current conference is more likely to get that than the Mountain West.
Right. The conference, the AAC is more in line.
Not that the AAC is getting that, but the Mountain West has some great brands with really bad geography, metrics, numbers, viewership, marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, put in perspective, Boise State can't get into the Pac-12 10 years ago, and they were, the media darling. They just don't. There's nothing. The Boise market is so small. I mean, they'll only reach like 1 million people. They don't get a lot of ratings. They really don't get good ratings. So.
Yeah. When they were BCS, don't go ahead, buddy.
The Mountain West does have one thing going for it. It is now going to be the only conference that has that 10:30 Eastern start time for games. I don't think you're going to see any. I don't think you're going to see the Big 12 run Arizona State in that time slot. Maybe one game a year, 2 games a year. And I don't think you're going to see the Big 10 run anybody in that time slot either. So the Mountain West might have that all locked up.
I think you'll see some like non-conference stuff for the West Coast Big Ten teams. Probably, like you said, maybe once a year, kind of drop in there. It's like a random like non-conference game when it's like
that could be their Big Ten network game too, because everybody's obligated to play a Big Ten network game, and that's usually where we bury them. So put those no good non-conference games on the Big Ten network.
So the Pac-12 does. The Pac-12 network did the same exact thing. Oh, you're playing Portland State? Okay. To the Pac-12 network you go.
It's Brooding Slav. That's a great name, by the way, Brooding Slav. I appreciate you being here. New to the show. Thank you. Please subscribe. Everybody, if you're new to the show, please give us a subscription. I'm not talking about the paying kind. I'm talking about just subscribe and turn on your notifications so you know when the show is on. If you would like to join the channel, then that would come with a subscription cost, and it makes it so I can highlight your comments to me, and I try to bring those up. Super chats are always available also if you want to make sure your comment is read. Brooding Slav says, I'm a contracts attorney. There isn't anything there to terminate this contract, or FSU and their lawyers would have found it.
I might actually turn this back into a question to him if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Sure.
All right. Now, we say there's nothing there, as if this is like a flat contract, like there's no time period involved, and people saying like it's been here this long, so there can't be anything to it. But what if the problem itself is because of the time that it took to get the ACC network going? It took them like 3 years just to start to get coverage on it. And then in terms of placement in cable carriers, these are things that take time to prove that they're actually not living up to their side of the contract. You can't just come in 2 years later and say, you failed. I mean, we're talking now, it's 6-7 years later, and they're feeling at that point in time like they haven't lived up to it. I don't see, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to, sit here and lecture you. I'm sure you're going to know better than me, but just putting that to you out there, after a period of time of proving that the ACC network is not living up to the promises of ESPN, does that not then give some premise to that? Let's see what he has to say about that. I'm just kind of curious.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to comment on that before I move on?
None of us have read the contract, so
I've never read the contract. The only thing that I remember them saying is, we might need a year.
Right.
Well,
right.
That's the only thing I was like, that perked my ears, is when he said, we might need a year. Like, one of the trustees was like, we might need a year to figure this out. I'm like,
that's crazy.
We have seen it. We've seen the ACC. It's come out. It's pretty widespread now, and they're extremely basic. So I think the point of the extension that came in 2016 is that the AC network was a big part of that, and the promise of what that was going to pay.
Renee Rocha, I think you're new to the show. It's nice to see you here. Thanks for being. He says, dang, these beers are going down pretty fast, Cloak and Dagger. So thank you very much for coming here after Greg's show. It is all Cloak and Dagger. And if there's anybody that has been on top of this from the very beginning, it's Greg Flugar. And I think we all just need to tip our hat to him and really appreciate the coverage that he's given. And he's been one of my mentors, and I know he's worked with you guys as well. And I hope everybody who's watching here, go and subscribe to his show. If you're not already watching, you're missing stuff. And that's where we get our sort of watchword is from him, and that's how it goes. So thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Now, Nick M says, Brooding Saws, I'm a retired attorney. I love this, the duel of the attorneys. And while I generally agree with your assumption, lock 5 attorneys in a room to discuss an issue, and they'll return 25 opinions.
probably not wrong.
There you go.
If every lawyer was right with their opinion, no case would ever go to court.
Nope.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I think so. Let's move along here. Mike Smith says, Greg said that UA and ASU had already started behind the scenes, and now Utah will start, or maybe that was Monty. All I know is that when I went on the Utah Board of Regents site, it's actually a trustees page, they don't have a meeting scheduled until August 8th. So I don't think there is anything on the books for tomorrow, unless
do they even need to have a meeting?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know.
I did have a conversation on Twitter with Larry about this, actually.
And what did Larry say?
He originally thought that Utah did not need the same type of meetings. And then he said later that he had talked with someone who knows more about this than him, and they said that they do, and that Utah would operate in a similar fashion as the Arizona schools. So
okay.
We don't have any smoke from there yet. So it does seem like something's holding that up.
Okay. West Virginia Mountaineer, Lair with Kenny. I see Arizona, ASU, and Utah to the Big 12, which obviously would take us to 16. After that, Pitt, Virginia Tech, Louisville, and North Carolina State. I think that's the dream scenario.
I think
do you guys think that all those teams are available once the ACC blows up?
No.
I don't think they will. I also think, like, Virginia and Virginia Tech, their attorney general has already come out and be like, they're attached. So
right.
They're going to go to the same conference. So I'm with Mo, and I don't think they'll all be available for the Big 12.
And I think the same thing happens with UNC and NC State. I think they're attached at the hip too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have VT and NC State going to the SEC in my projection, and Louisville definitely to the Big 12. Possibly to the SEC, depending upon how far it goes. But I think in this round coming up, that first move, they'll be to the Big 12. Pitt probably as well.
There is just so much stuff that's out in the air right now. I think what we're going to do is let's leave that conversation here for now. I think next week we have a show. It's going to be on Monday, and we'll basically be covering all this stuff that's going to be happening this weekend. I feel a little anxious about continuing and talking about stuff that is actually in the wind right this second. So, do you guys have anything else you want to add to what we've talked about tonight?
Washington Board of Regents meets at 9:00 Pacific. I have no idea why so late.
Oh, tonight?
Tonight.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're meeting tonight at 9:00, and then the football program canceled their practice tomorrow. So
Right.
So
I saw Rebecca talking about that on Twitter. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, I'm fully expecting something coming out of this tonight. Although a few people were like, we're not expecting anything, but you don't cancel a practice. And it caught even reporters' attention. They were like, you don't really cancel a practice unless you expect a distraction. So,
Well, I can
Moen,
say
do you
that
have anything?
from the big side, there was no media was allowed to be scheduled. This today and tomorrow. So, but I don't believe the announcement will come until next week. I believe they want to let Arizona State, and Utah have that spotlight first, and then they'll get all their stuff worked out, and then they'll have their own time to shine when they make the announcement on Washington and Oregon. But it's going to happen. Washington and Oregon are Big Ten members. Welcome to the conference, Huskies and Oregon. Kiss the ring.
I think it's great.
I say welcome Washington +1. We'll probably Oregon, but we'll see.
Don't say that to the Duck fans. They're not. We're all day. We've been like, look, there's one of three scenarios. It's Washington and Oregon, Washington and Stanford, or Washington, Stanford, Oregon, and Cal. We're like, there's a common denominator there, guys.
Right.
I will say this: if it's not Oregon, it's not Stanford or Cal. Despite the leak, it would be ASU or Utah.
Sergeant Pickles, last comment here. He says, Big 12 Mafia Holy Rival Show, said it on Greg's show yesterday. We're on the verge of trading the dagger for the guillotine. I think that is a good way to go out. That's absolutely what's going on here. And I appreciate everybody being here today. I mean, Earl Carr, CBS Sports is reporting Arizona is a hard lean. We already talked about that. I mean, you guys, this community is just amazing. I appreciate everybody being here, especially with the time change. Everybody coming in the door and being part of this. I really appreciate it. Do you guys want to say anything else before we go?
I'll just hang in there, folks.
Yeah. I want to just say the Blue Angels are flying around in Seattle for Seafair, which is an annual thing out here. And
do they still do hydroplanes, Becky?
They still do the hydroplanes.
Okay, because I'm from. Did I tell you I'm from Richland, right? So hydroplanes in the Tri-Cities was a thing.
Huge,
and back in the 80s, it was the bomb.
Yes.
With Chip Hanauer and Miss Budweiser. Oh
right?
my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
I miss all that stuff so much.
But yeah, the University of Washington, they're buzzing around the stadium, and the players never even bothered to look. They're locked. So.
Right. Well, I appreciate
like,
that. One last super chat from Sergeant Pickles. He says, "Happy to have another Husky in here. I'm with you. Both excited and sad to be leaving the pack, but this could be the start of a great era. Go Dogs."
Yeah. Now stop complaining about Ohio State canceling the game. We knew it was going to be a conference game all along, and that's why we did that.
Well, you know what? We got to cancel the Michigan games that are in the future now.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Just one thing, if I could.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
I normally on Twitter, I'm just responding to what people are saying, but I did put something out for those who are kind of maybe wondering what a timeline is that we're looking at here. If they want to look me up at Immaculate View on Twitter, I put up a timeline for what you can expect from the pack side on this possibly. Go ahead and respond in if you feel differently, whatever. Been having a few conversations on there, just so that way maybe you have something to read to kind of catch on to what's going on. Otherwise, I know it can be a bit confusing at times.
Moen, answer this question. Big 12 Mafia, what is the most realistic combination for the Big Ten from the ACC? Miami, Miami, Florida State, Miami, Clemson, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, or Miami and North Carolina?
Probably Florida State and Clemson. If you can only take two, I think you take the South Carolina. You get one Florida school, take that Carolina market. Got a lot of Big Ten transplants in the Carolinas, so I know Clemson's not on par academically with Miami, but I know Immaculate disagrees with me, but we
Little
only need
bit.
one school in Florida.
I give one school. I'll give Miami, and I'll give, if I have to pick out of that, it's Miami and North Carolina to the Big Ten, and SEC is going to block Florida State and Clemson. But they might block Florida State and NC, and somehow we end up with Clemson and Miami. I can't wrap my head around Clemson to the Big Ten, though.
Hey, regardless of how it happens, it just means Notre Dame's one step closer to joining the Big Ten. So
I
That's
think
all NBC.
I'm gonna be the crazy person. I think it's gonna be Miami and North Carolina. They fit everything. They also get into Florida, which getting into Miami, the biggest media market in the state of Florida, that would be a nice poke in the ribs of the SEC. Because I think the SEC is eyeballing Miami more so than like Florida State.
My only issue
Really?
with North Carolina to the Big Ten is
Uh-huh.
NC State would have to be promised a spot in the SEC, and I think SEC knows that, and so they'll never promise NC State a spot until North Carolina promises to the SEC.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Ross Dellinger got this from Dylan Vance, who sent me this last message. He says, Big 12 executives met Thursday to approve the application of Arizona as the 14th member. Sources tell Yahoo Sports, paving the way for the Wildcats to enter the conference. It is another step in UA's path to join. The final step would be approval from its board of regents. That was 2 minutes ago. So
there
So
you
they
go.
So they're doing it
There we
right
go.
now.
let's close this sucker down. All right, thanks everybody. Please subscribe, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and think about subscribing, joining the channel. That'd be great. We really appreciate all you guys. Becky, thanks for being here. I hope you'll do this again with us. This has been a lot of fun.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, guys.
You bet, of course. And then Moen and Immaculate, thanks guys. I appreciate it as always. Thanks for jumping on here on a late on a Thursday night. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And nice to meet you, Rebecca. Always fun listening to you talking to Greg, but good to get a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, nice meeting you too.
All right. We'll see everybody later. Have a great night. Peace.
Night, guys.